Hello, everybody. I am Catharsis. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new, hi, hello, welcome in. So today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different on the channel. I had recently put out a poll on my Tumblr of basically different ideas I had for content besides gameplay, and this was the winner. So I hope that this is insightful. I hope that you learned something new, or maybe it's just a refresher course for you. But either way, I hope you enjoy. So this is going to be kind of a guide on how to take like good quality, nice aesthetic looking pictures in The Sims 3. And I've been playing The Sims 3 since its release, and I have done professional photography in real life as well. So I've learned a lot in how real life photography techniques can be applied to digital photography, such as The Sims. And I have fought with this game for 15, 16 years now and gone through the trenches. So hopefully you do not have to. So this is going to be kind of a guide on how to basically take those real life techniques and apply them to The Sims. So for the basics, I think we're going to start off with just some photography terms that can be helpful and that you can keep in the back of your mind while taking pictures, starting with the subject. The subject is the main focus. That's who or what the photograph is about. Okay, so the subject is what you are taking the picture of and what you want the main focus of the photo to be, who or what you want the viewer to look at first. That's your subject. Next, we have composition. So the composition are the visual elements within the image to create an aesthetically pleasing photograph. And so you would put all of these tips and tricks that I'm going to talk about in this video into practice to improve your composition, if that makes sense. The composition is like the overall quality and like visual appeal of the photograph. Next, we have orientation, which just means how the camera is positioned. We have two orientations: portrait, which is a tall image, but you also have landscape orientation, which is a wide image. So really the main difference between the two: portrait is tall, landscape is wide, and it's usually used for expansive scenes or large groups of people. And so just imagine, like, you want to take a picture of like a mountain range. You want to get as much of that mountain range in the shot as you can. So you would use a wide landscape orientation. It really does just depend on what you're trying to capture or convey in the photo. The foreground is what is closest to the camera. So if you think about it in layers, the foreground is like the very first layer of the photograph. It's usually the first thing you see, and it's usually the subject, but not always. And I will touch on that a little bit later. Background is pretty self-explanatory. It's the part that is behind the main subject, providing context and depth and balance to the overall photo. So yeah, that is a couple of terms that I think would benefit people to know if they do not know already. So I have in game here, I have my wonderful founder of my Lepathy challenge, Carmen. She's going to be my model for the day. So we are going to talk about some basic practices now. And the first one is the rule of thirds. So what rule of thirds is a visual guideline, and it requires you to basically just imagine a 3x3 grid over your image or over your screen, divided into 9 equal parts. And so now I'm going to show you some examples of how to use rule of thirds. So we have our photo here, and you can see that she is smack dab in the middle of these boxes. And that's actually something you don't want to do, because rule of thirds basically means you are taking this grid and you want your subject to be on the lines of the left side or of the right side. So towards 1/3 of the grid. And so it creates more dimension in a photo and more depth, and it gives you more control and creativity to work with the space that you're in your frame. So if we adjust it with the rule of thirds in mind, we can get a much better angle and therefore a much better photo. And here is another example from a photo that I've taken that I want the sim on the phone who looks like she's in distress. I want that to be what people focus on. I want to draw their eye to her. So, in order to do that, using the rule of thirds, I have aligned that picture. I have kept this grid in my mind while I was posing her and taking this photo. So, I aligned her more towards the left third of this photo, and you see how all of these lines are intersecting her. And you see where these green stars are? That is where those horizontal and vertical lines intersect. And those are really great anchor points to utilize when it comes to the rule of thirds. And here are just some quick other examples. Like this car is aligned on the right side, and you can see it aligns with those star points that are, the line is going straight through it. Same with this one. The line is going straight through the girl in this photo. And it is, yes, she is leaning a little bit more towards the center, but that is okay because she is not directly in the center. So you just have to balance it out a little bit. And then my final example for rule of thirds is this photo here. And you may think, oh, well, the table is in the center of the photo. Like that's what you just told me not to do. So if you look closer, how the chairs are set up, they create lines. And the table creates lines. And so if you look, the chairs where they are at, those are aligned with those green points. And if you create lines in your photos like that, it draws the eye in. That way the eye is looking straight down that table. So we know like that is where the focus should be because the eye is being drawn inward and like down, kind of like looking down an alley. So that is also something that you can do, though it may be a bit more advanced. And the next basic practice we have is framing. So framing is basically using elements within the scene to create a frame around the main subject. So you can see in this example here how the leaves of the trees in this bush are kind of along the edges of the frame itself, of the shot of the camera, and how they kind of close off the rest of the space to really draw your eye into the subject of the photo, which in this case would be the back porch of this house. Another example really quick is just how you see the leaves of the trees are framing on the edge corner there, and how, again, it kind of cuts off the rest of the space and kind of directs your eye on where to be looking. And this is actually kind of a double framing moment because you also see that he's standing in an archway. So you can get really creative with your framing, and it's a great way to really highlight your subjects. And so next we're going to talk about exposure. So exposure is basically how bright something is. So you see here with Carmen that right now the lighting is pretty evenly lit. Like there's not any harsh shadows anywhere, and she's very like neutral. You can see the details of her face. There is a spectrum of exposure. You can be overexposed or you can be underexposed. So right now I have Carmen here, and technically you can see the details of her face. It is, the lighting is even, but the lighting is too dark. So basically you can see kind of like the details of her pores. It's kind of pixelated. It definitely could use some improvement. So basically what I can do is what I like to use are bug lights, which I will touch on later. Because like I move the bug lights around her, and it makes her much more bright, like her skin tone look even. There's no harsh shadows or dark patches, and it makes it look a lot better. And it just makes it a lot better if you have even lighting without being too bright, like in their face to where it washes them out, because then you are overexposed. An example of overexposure is something like this. So you are outside, you have your lighting selected and placed or whatever, but you see how it is washing her out. You can't really see the details of her face as like crisp and clear because they're just blinded, basically, essentially. So that is something to watch out for. Yes, you can fix exposure to an extent in an editing software such as Photoshop, but if it's underexposed and you ramp up the exposure in Photoshop, you run the risk of it looking pixelated and like banding. For an example of banding, do you see how the wallpaper has those like weird lines down it, going down it in like a question mark shape a little bit? So yeah, that is an example of banding. Banding is not pretty. And we want to avoid banding at all costs if we can. And if something is underexposed and you ramp up the exposure, you run the risk of creating bands that were not there before. So it's really important to get a good, evenly lit, not too bright to where it washes them out, and not too dark to where it's kind of just icky. It's really important to get that photo in game. That way you have like a good base to go off of if you decide to edit it further in Photoshop. Okay, so now we are going to go into some game tips. So the first thing we want to go over in the actual game itself is the camera controls. The first thing is first, if you hit tab, you go into the tab mode. Okay, so we are in tab mode, which offers a lot more control over your camera angles. So to pan or to move the camera forward or backwards, you can use the arrow keys or you can use the WASD keys for this. So you're going to move forward with W, backward with S, to the left with A, to the right with D. Pretty simple and straightforward, right? You can also zoom in, technically, by using the plus sign and the minus sign, or your scroll wheel if you have a mouse with a scroll wheel. You can zoom, right, to move farther away, but definitely I would recommend using your pan key. So that is S, W, up and down arrows to move farther away versus using the scroll wheel or zoom keys, because you lose significant quality when you use the zoom versus the pan. Wanted to zoom out. I say I wanted a full body shot. You see how she gets like crispy, like her edges get crispy, and like you see the loss in quality as compared to me zooming all the way in and me just panning and just going farther away with the camera versus the zoom. So to save your camera position, say you have a situation like you really like this particular shot, right? But her hand is clipping through the hair, and so maybe you want to change the hair. Say I really like this angle. Okay, the nice trees are in the background. You can see some sky. So I'm going to hit the F10 key to toggle on my UI and get rid of like the pause button over there in the action bar. So at this point, you could take it with the C key for your screenshot, or you can take it with your print screen if you're using reshade or whichever hotkey you have decided. Say, I want to keep this angle. I really like it. She looks good. The pose is cute, whatever. So if you hit Control and any key between 5 and 9 on the top bar of numbers, it does not work with the number pad. It has to be the top numbers. So say I hit 7, Control 7. And a lot of the time, the mouse is the camera is very sensitive in The Sims 3. So say I can't get that angle back somehow. So if I hit 7, the camera will move exactly to where I had saved it. And now I can take my picture. So if you go in and say you want to change her hair, So now I have changed her hair to something that is not going to clip. And you may not always get that, but it is useful for that kind of circumstance. It's useful for, oh, I really liked the angle that I was at. I want to save that so I can go back. It is also a very good tool to use for what is called composite images, which is basically taking two images and kind of mashing them together. That way you can easily restore parts that were clipping with ones that aren't and stuff like that. And I can go into that in further detail in another video if you guys would like. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the 7 key, and it's going to put me right back to that same angle so I can take that photo without the hair clipping through the arm this time. The only kicker to this is it only works in landscape. So if you rotate this and I position her the way I want, say I like this angle, if I do control 6. Okay. And then if I reset the camera with control S and say, oh, I really want to do that shot again. If I hit 6, it kind of does it, but it's not the same. Another few helpful tips here that we have is there's a cheat code. Say you want to hide this plumb bob because it's like ruining your shot, or she has like a thought bubble or a speech bubble, and you want to get rid of that. Enter your cheat codes, Control Shift C to enter that. You want to type in this cheat code. It's hide headline effect on, and that will get rid of it. It may take a second if it is like a speech or a thought bubble for them to like continue processing that thought or that sentence that they're talking about. But it will go away, and then it will not come back until you turn that cheat off, and it will come back. There is a simmer that has made a mod that hides the headline effects automatically, and I can link that down below if you want that. But I personally like to just turn it on and off myself because I don't want it off when I'm doing my gameplay streams, because I like to see what they're talking about. It can add funny context. It's really up to your personal decision and what you are using it for. The next thing is the backdrop. So to prevent banding, which we had talked about earlier, I like to use this giant screenshot backdrop. This is like my makeshift photo studio here. And this backdrop is a lifesaver. I take like all of my CC previews on this, and it just really makes for a nice solid background because sometimes that's just what you're wanting. It's one of the best things made for this game, and it also doubles as a light. So it does help give a nice like even backlighting to your subject as well. The next tip we have here is the by debug lights. So that's what these like squares are. You can enter the cheat testing cheats enabled true and then the cheat code by debug. And I will do that right now just to show you. And then by debug. And you will get this box with a question mark up here. And you're going to go to miscellaneous objects. There are ceiling lights of various different sizes. So you can do like a 2x1. You can have this big circle one, a 3x1, whichever. Okay, it comes in various sizes for your various different needs. There's also wall lights of various sizes. There's one, and then there's like these huge ones if you want that. I usually just tend to stick with the small ones because I don't need all of that. And it offers me more control of my lighting, and they work like normal lights. So to change the colors of these, you just hit control and shift and click on them, and they work like have interactions like any other lamp in the game. I use these because they disappear in live mode. That way I don't have any like lamps or any weird things blocking my shot. I'm free to go and do and move about the cabin as I so please without having to worry about it. But yeah, you can totally move these and play with the lighting all you want. And then you get kind of a different effect. So say I wanted to turn them red. I could turn them red. And then you really see the difference and you get a whole different vibe. So lighting is definitely a huge thing in photography, especially if you're playing with colors and various like brightnesses and things like that. Somebody actually made a mod for these as well to recategorize them, to put them in just miscellaneous lighting, because people can have trouble saving if they have by debug like active. So if you don't want that and you just want to use the by debug cheat code, make sure you get your lights and then turn that off by just typing in by debug off and then saving your game, because people have had trouble with their games not wanting to save or crashing while by debug is enabled. And we don't want that to happen. So the next thing for just other helpful stuff is obviously reshade is a big topic in this conversation. Reshade is completely optional. You don't need reshade to apply any of these other things. Reshade is definitely personal preference. I know a lot of people who use reshade, and I know a lot of people who don't. And it really is up to you. I really like reshade. I feel like it does a lot of the heavy lifting for me when it comes to aesthetics. And there are plenty of tutorials on how to install reshade, so I will not be going over that. But like I said, there's plenty, and you can find them on YouTube and Tumblr and all sorts of places. So yeah, reshade is definitely not a requirement. It's not a do or die, like you must have it kind of thing. It is a personal preference, and I know that a lot of people like it, and that is up to you to use or not. So, and then finally, what I kind of want to leave off with this is that look for inspo, because inspiration is everywhere. And you can find inspiration on Pinterest. You can find it on TikTok, Tumblr, even just Googling a kind of concept that you have in mind. I love Pinterest for inspiration for themes. I like to basically take a photo that I see on Pinterest, usually a real life photo, and I will try to recreate that in the game to the best of my ability. I find it really fun to do that. The caveat to that is do not like deliberately go out of your way to carbon copy somebody else's idea. You get a little bit of freedom when it comes to transferring something from real life into The Sims, because it's never going to look 100% the exact same. But when everybody is using like same CC and having the same styles and stuff like that, that can blur the line and get tricky. So just be sure that you're putting your own spin on the ideas that you see and that you're coming up with, because people put a lot of work into their photos. And I know firsthand on several accounts that it is very disheartening to have somebody copy your work, because the term that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery is complete bullshit. I hate that term. It just makes me mad. It is fine to take inspiration and put your own spin on it, but please do not carbon copy other people's work, because that is honestly disrespectful, and we don't want to be disrespectful here. And also that when in doubt, less is more. You don't have to overload a scene with objects or a bunch of sims, or if it's a single sim, you don't have to overload them with like CC and accessories, because then it's going to look busy and we won't really know where our eyes should be looking. We don't really know the subject of the photo. And that's kind of what the photo is all about, right? So there's a fine line between low effort and minimalism. With minimalism, everything is placed with a purpose. So you want to make sure you're being mindful and placing those things with purpose, instead of just throwing a bunch of stuff together and hoping and wishing and praying that you get lucky and it turns out to look aesthetically good. And I speak for myself when I say this, that I do kind of have like neurotic crackhead energy when it comes to taking my photos. I will place everything very meticulously and turn my camera to see, the kind of angles that I'm envisioning in my head, to see if it looks good from that angle or from different angles, to try to experiment. So it's definitely, there's a learning curve to it. Photography is a skill. While it is an art form and some people do just naturally have the eye for it, it can be taught, which is why I'm making this video, which is why you're watching this video. there is always room for improvement. And I will leave you with like, comparison is the thief of joy. If you are comparing yourself to somebody else, you are only seeing the final product of that person's efforts. You are not seeing the amount of work or planning or converting or editing that went into that final product. You only see the results, and then you get down on yourself of like, oh, well, why my pictures don't look like that? And you have to think, am I putting in that same amount of effort? Am I putting that same amount of love into that photo? And if the answer is no, that is okay, but you can't expect to have that low effort yielding high results. You know what I'm saying? Also, give yourself grace and be patient with yourself. Be okay with it not turning out how you want this time around. They can't all be winners. I know I have had several times where photos don't turn out the way that I want, and it's okay. You just move on. You try again. It's going to be okay. And really, that's the biggest tip of all of the entire video, is to just have fun with it, because Sims is supposed to be fun. Creating things is supposed to be fun. So try not to stress about it. And I know I say that as a raging perfectionist, so it is a lot easier said than done, but just try to keep that in mind. So that is all the tips I have for this guide. If you learned anything, or if this was sort of a refresher course for you, let me know down below either way. I will leave all the things I talked about in the description with links and things like that. And if you have any questions or want me to go into more detail in another video about something, you can shout that out as well. But that is all I got. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one.